cryptocurrencies, which I have always believed is the future of the world. I've talked to people who think the US dollar is represented by gold and silver. It's not represented by anything.
An important thing happened when we went off the gold standard. There was a real crisis right at that point, whether the dollar was going to remain the world reserve currency. And what they did was made a deal with Saudi Arabia that set the precedent that everything would be traded in dollars. So now what you have is the petrodollar. All the trades have to be done in dollars for oil. It's a different world now.
Oh my God, it's such a different world now.
Half of the money that is in the world has been printed in the last 2 years. Blockchain technology is the backbone of the Bitcoin network. Blockchain is the ledger that keeps track of all the transfers of the assets.
And that's what the government hates. The government did not like anything that was decentralized. And that's what my problem was. I was involved in a peer-to-peer. We had created the first peer-to-peer. They came after me. Once they realized what we were doing, they were like, no fucking way. We can't have this survive. Okay, first of all, we want to just say out loud, we're completely happy with our lives and none of us want to commit suicide.
Yes, that's true. If I suddenly die in a car crash or an airplane flight, right, Jude? Or somebody says I committed suicide, please investigate.
Yeah, Jude's in a bunker. He's pretty safe from all the bullshit that we contend with. But so today, this evening, we're doing an evening podcast. I have two friends of mine. One is Frank Polsinello. I don't know if he's Luciferian, but he belongs to Dartmouth. and he was a theologian, right? He majored in theology.
I did. I majored in religion.
Yeah, he's wearing a collar and everything. So I don't know what that means. But then, and then Roman Catholic. I'm Roman. Well, I'm not. I'm Gnostic Christianity. That's what we'll get into that maybe a little bit. Just to explain the name of the podcast, which is the Sleeping Man Podcast, which came out of Gnostic Christianity. The second person on the phone is Jude Goldman, who is not Christian. He's Jewish.
I'm an anti-theist.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And he is, I've known Frank for, I don't know, 30 years. I don't even know. Yeah, 30 years. And I've known Jude for probably 20, right? 15, 20?
Yeah, I would say we go back close to that at least.
Yeah. So Jude was originally on the Sleeping Man podcast, the ones we had done originally, and we took a break from it. I had to take a break from it because we were building a wellness center and we had a whole bunch of stuff going on, plus the death threats from the Illuminati members that I was getting on Instagram, and they were sending it through my, you tell people that and they're like, oh, you're full of shit. I can't even tell you how many people, but the one guy was so interesting. He was like, his tagline was, he was baptized in sin and bathed in filth. I was like, wow, what a nice guy. He sent me a nice little, little love letter one day on Instagram Messenger. So I'm always, I'm always hesitant with the crazy bastards that are on all these social media networks. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, so tonight we were going to talk about a bunch of things related to the economy, but we're really focusing on cryptocurrencies, which I have always believed is the future of the world, which kind of eliminates a lot of bullshit that is associated with the dollar and the euro and all that. But before I do all that, I'm just going to have Frank say a few words about what you're up to. You're up to no good, quite honestly, right?
I am up to very good now. That's my past you're thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
okay.
Up to a lot of good.
No, that's the problem. But anyway, so you're firing up a hedge fund that's focused on cryptos and platforms, not just the crypto.
Right. It's going to be a multi-asset.
Okay.
So 50% of the fund will be invested in cryptocurrencies and digital assets. The other half will be in publicly traded companies that have exposure to blockchain technology. and the other 20% are futures contracts that we can use to go long or short to use to hedge our positions.
So when you're hedging your position with those futures, that's all commodity driven. So you're just looking at the economy going, okay, here's what we have to do to hedge our whatever bets you're making.
Well, they have actually categorized Bitcoin and Ethereum as commodities, and they trade on the Chicago Merc Exchange.
Oh, I didn't know that. When did that happen?
Within the last 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm a little behind on this stuff.
Yeah. So that's part of the regulation that people want to see coming. So this was one of the first steps. But now that there's other ETFs on Bitcoin, and that it's traded on the Chicago Merc for futures, it allows big institutions to short it to help influence, which direction.
Oh, we're going to get into all that shit for sure. I think one of the things, Jude, what you got anything to say on this spooky voodoo currency shit that we're talking about today? You got?
Well, it's funny because I I actually had a meeting today with a woman and wants to design an interactive NFT experience, which I thought was really fascinating because when I had heard about the Executive Order 14067, I texted that to a few friends, you being one of them. It was, again, I'm not abreast on all this, like probably Frank, much more current, because I think that was signed back in March. Maybe you could probably fool me on that, but I just heard about it a few days ago.
Oh,
and of course, me being the paranoid, minded person I was thinking, oh, great, now if we get rid of tangible assets and move fully into this digital realm with everything encrypted, every movement will be tracked. So it's more the paranoid side of me. And this woman I met with today was trying to calm me down, saying this is more of just kind of an entry level dance into it, and not to be so paranoid about it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, I can remember probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, everybody that was a hedge fund guy was saying, oh, this is bullshit. And nobody wanted to, there's obvious reasons why no one wanted to adopt it. But we were talking offline, and one of the things that I think we both agreed on, Frank and I agreed on, was that the reason there's cryptocurrency is probably starts from the 1960s. 1971, where Nixon said, yeah, we're going off the gold standard. Mm-hmm. And basically, and I'll let you expand on that, basically we went bankrupt.
That's why they did it.
Yeah, and
there wasn't enough gold reserves to back the
we
number of dollars that we had printed.
Right, and we've been in a state of bankruptcy since.
And that's a whole other conversation we've had. What backed the U.S. dollar, and we've said guns, and fear. That's a whole other podcast.
No, it's a whole other podcast, absolutely. But it dovetails into the fact that the U.S. dollar is propped by petroleum. I mean, we went from and why don't we talk about that?
Right. So in 71, we went off the gold standard because we were bankrupt. We had printed more dollars and raised money in bonds for the Vietnam War than we had gold and reserves to back it. Mm-hmm. So in order to keep the world economy going, that was all dependent on the U.S. dollar, extending from the Bretton Woods conference in 1946 that made the dollar the global reserve currency. So now we had to, we went to a fiat currency, so we're not backed by anything other than the faith and trust in our government.
Right. Which is frightening when you consider who runs the government.
And we went through.
Well, would you say, is it GDP? Is that back? I mean, it used to balance, our debt would balance, GDP would balance the debt, right? That's what we used to say.
Well, they've gone through all different versions of this where they thought if the debt was just a certain percentage of GDP, it was okay. And that started out as 30% and then 40% and 50%. And now our debt is 130%.
Oh, yeah. Last time it was 110. So we're up to 130
of GDP.
Usually that means bad things.
Yeah.
You exceed that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a historical precedent, at that level of debt.
You know what the amazing thing is, though, with the U.S. economy, and every time I'm talking about this, I'm wondering what we don't know that they know, because there's just got to be so much dynamically huge cash flow that falls into the Treasury that we're just able to stay ahead of it. I just always wonder who's the guy who's paying the bills. Like, he must look like that guy. Remember in the movie Waterworld, where Kevin Costner gets on the ship and he's going to blow the fucking ship up, and the old guy's down there, and Costner throws the flare down into the tank and blows it up, and the guy sees it coming down and he goes, "Oh, thank God, it's over." And I think there's a guy somewhere in Washington, right? He's in a room with a visor on, and he's sitting there writing out checks, and he's like, "Oh my God, when is this going to be over? God Almighty, help me!" I really believe that there's the people. It's so incredibly frightening if people really understood it, between the Treasury, the Federal Reserve. How do they keep it rocking? And
even just the basis of our banking system. When you're going to the bank, when you give them your deposit, all that small print when you open up a contract now with the bank, your application, and the fine print is, this is now the bank's money.
Right.
And you have to ask them for permission to get it back.
Well, you know what? Every time I go to an ATM and I pay $3 to take my own money out.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, 50 cents I'd be okay with, but $3, when you think about the compounded return on ATM machines, it's crazy.
But even beyond that, you're actually giving your money. You have
right.
You're giving your money to the bank in the hopes that they're good actors and
you're going to be honest with us. Bankers and politicians are wonderful.
Are going to give you your money back.
Right.
So that's what's happened with, the war here. We've started to use the dollar as a weapon, and now we're closing bank accounts.
Right.
And, we're at war and we're using the dollar as a weapon. And now other countries, even some of our allies or some of their border allies, are wondering if they want the U.S. as a reserve, the dollar as a reserve currency, because maybe they'll be next to have their accounts shut down.
Yeah, well,
if they don't do what the U.S. wants, if they don't act in a certain way,
right.
How long are we going to continue to shut down bank accounts and
that's right.
weaponize people financially?
Yep,
and around the world.
And we know that the Saudis recently, but this administration, though, they were okay with the previous administration. But the Saudis, the Chinese, Iranians, Russians, and I believe that Vladimir Putin said, you can't buy my oil with U.S. dollars, right? He's completely switched over to his currency, which has been propping him up. But these guys are all working overtime on diminishing that dollar, because they know that if they can do that, we're totally fucked. And we are really in a third world war, but it's not the war that people are used. This is my opinion. It's not the war that people are used to seeing, where buildings are being blown up. Nobody wants to destroy the infrastructure they've got to rebuild. So it's either let's throw over a biochemical disease like COVID, and at the same time, let's just fuck up the banking system on the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that's another fear of the 14067 is that if we move over to all digital assets, it'd be much easier for your crypto to just be shut off. You wouldn't have, like, now you could at least, I don't know about you guys, but the stash of cash you have buried in the backyard, you could survive off grid for a little while. But if we move to a fully digital asset, it would be easier to stop that flow.
Well, there's
from
two
outside
different
sources.
things you were talking about. So Bitcoin is a digital asset that's beyond anybody's control. There's no
Yeah, why don't you
explain
explain that? Because for people who are going to listen to this, they're probably like, "What the fuck's a Bitcoin?"
The decentralized version, right?
Right.
Like Ethereum.
Right. So
I'm talking about a government centralized.
Exactly. No, I understand that. And that's why I was saying I was going to emphasize or comment what the difference was between Bitcoin and what you're saying, where when the government issues their own digital asset, it's going to be able to track every single move you make, every dollar you spend. So here's the difference. Bitcoin was made after the financial crisis. It's a software program that when it initially started could have been easily, not adopted or stopped if somebody really wanted to stop it. But what it is a software network, not any different from, say, Netflix or Google and
any of the social media networks or
Facebook,
LinkedIn, or anything where there's people that are trading whatever it is they're trading, pictures, information, ideas. That's all really what
they're software networks.
Right.
And they're incredibly powerful because as you add one new member, the growth is exponential. So the best example of that is when the phone was invented, right? One phone is a doorstop. 2 phones is interesting. Now you get 3 phones, 4 phones. The utility and the number of connections grows exponentially with just adding one new member. Now you make that, compound that by 1 million and more computers that are hooked up, and they're incredibly powerful. So Bitcoin is a software network connecting all these different computers all over the world. Now that people can trade this Bitcoin asset directly without any interference, no friction.
Right.
If you've gone to wire any money in the last couple of years,
impossible.
Costs you $15. It takes you, I don't even know how many days. You
3 days. I have the customer I have to do it with. So.
And you can't even initiate it over the phone. You have to go in and sit
bank,
with somebody.
Sign the documents.
It's antiquated.
It's
unbelievable that you have to do that for your own money to be sent somewhere.
Right. And they have to know
where
exactly what it is, who it's going to, what it's being used for. And there's all this shit you have to go through when you send money to a vendor, to pay a vendor. It's really ridiculous.
Right. So the power of Bitcoin on top of it, it gets a little complicated and there's different parts to it. But we were talking initially about going off the gold standard.
Right.
And that we're in a fiat currency that's not backed by anything. And that there's an unlimited supply that we continue to print and grow our debt. Bitcoin, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that could ever exist. And right now we're at between 18 and 19 million. So there's more to be mined over the next, until 2030 is the last Bitcoin that could be mined. But because there's...
And we're still talking centralized Bitcoin, right? Like from a company entity, or are you talking decentralized?
Well, no, it's decentralized. It was created... the software.
I should say blockchain.
Say that again?
Yeah, I didn't catch it.
I should say there is a difference, right, between say Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin, which was what I would call centralized, and then the blockchain technology Bitcoin, like Ethereum, right, which is supposedly decentralized.
Yeah, no. Blockchain technology is the backbone of the Bitcoin network. Blockchain technology verifies every transaction on the blockchain and it remains there forever. The network is built in a way that you can't trust anybody. You sort of have to prove your trust. And in that manner, as it grows, it actually becomes more trustworthy. Every transaction
just brings legitimacy to the platform itself. But here's a question that, everybody asks this question. I don't know that anybody can answer the question. That's the whole That's the whole thing. Now, I have got some experience in peer-to-peer, which you're well aware of. And we built a peer-to-peer network, and the power of that exponential growth is really unmatched. And I want to get into the environment, because that is just the biggest pile of smoldering bullshit that I've ever read in my life, just what little bit I read of it. But the whole thing is that how does that mining occur? What is, because that leads into the environmental issue. But it's so confusing for people to understand. What does that mean when we talk about mining? Is there gnomes down in a cave digging the shit out of bitcoins? No, it's a digital process, right?
Yeah, it's hard. This is kind of the hardest part for me to explain, right. and it's not the best part, but people that are programmers, like my friends that I'm in business with, know that technology underneath and probably could do a better job. But here, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
When Bitcoin was created, what you need to do is solve a mathematical problem that's very complicated, and the software generates these questions, and the computer, other people that want to be on the network, go in and solve these problems. In 2010, when Bitcoin first came out, there's people that could use their laptop. You didn't need that much power to solve some of the equations. And when you solved it, you got Bitcoin in return, a certain number for that stage of what they're doing. If you solve the Bitcoin problem right now, mining a Bitcoin, you get 8 right now. Early on, you got a lot more than that. So right. In each stage, it's less and less.
So let's talk about the problem for a minute. Is the problem Bitcoin related? In other words, no. So it could be any problem.
Yeah, it's just a crazy mathematical problem. I haven't.
So is that a component? Is that a beginning component of AI, or it randomly will go through and come up with? I mean, that's pretty close to AI.
I would say so.
It's like you're spinning the wheel, and it's going to stop somewhere, and it's going to ask you a question. Right.
And the questions get harder and harder. So what's happened now is it takes hundreds of computers, ASICs computers, running 24/7 to break down these questions and answer them to earn the Bitcoin, to mine 8 Bitcoin.
So is the human answering the question, solving the question? No. So it's computer to computer. That is fucking crazy. That is Terminator shit. I don't think I understood that. I always thought, but whoever owns that computer who's doing that AI communique back and forth is going to own the Bitcoin.
Yes. Yeah. Have you seen some of these warehouses that just have tons of computers in there, and they're mining Bitcoin?
And they're mining Bitcoin. So
they have all these computers running the full time. But early on, you could do it on your laptop. It didn't demand so much energy. So that's what people are saying now. They see these warehouses and they say,
there's less.
Oh my God, this is terrible. How much energy does it take to run that warehouse 24/7 to answer these questions?
Right.
And when it's, right now, I guess Bitcoin is a $500 billion asset. At one point it was over $1 trillion. For $1 trillion, for $1 trillion entity, the amount of energy is not crazy compared to other $1 trillion entities and businesses that they have.
Yeah,
all over
Facebook
the world.
And Twitter. Right. And there's a huge amount of processing.
The energy, it's being crazily distorted with fear on this stuff about.
Well, there was a document they came out with, the government came out with, right? It was an evaluation of
the White House paper. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were saying that this was going to be a huge detriment to, it's all bullshit. Anything they can do.
They probably wanted to destabilize it so we could release our own. But right. I had a question back in 2010. You said there was like an original amount of Bitcoin created. Does that mean that encrypted barcodes, or however you want to, each Bitcoin comes with its own encrypted identifier, I assume, right?
Yes. It's like a 64 character. 64 digits and numeric and alphabet.
So it's
And
combination.
some of those got,
But they're so
and
long.
some of those got lost in the shuffle, and that's why we're mining them. Or
No, there's always
No.
a certain number, but a lot have been lost because early on, like I said, people had it on their laptops. They might have mined
Right, yeah.
Bitcoin, and they threw away their laptop when Bitcoin was worth $2, and they had
that one kid.
They had
$300 million or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
there's been people that want to go and
What happens to that? Is it like burning cash once it's gone?
you've lost it. See, and this is, I guess this sort of gets down to the real nitty gritty of it.
Right.
Do you feel better about giving your money to the bank and having somebody else take care of it so that you can't lose it? Or is it better for you to have the autonomy to hold your own money and be responsible for it?
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. Some people don't want the responsibility of having $2 million that they actually hold on a thumb drive or something. Exactly.
Yeah.
But when that happens, if there's a run on the bank, you have your $2 million on your thumbstick and everybody else is banging on the door of the bank,
never to get their money.
Right.
It's a wonderful life, right? Jimmy
and
Stewart.
so what gives each encryption, each Bitcoin, its value is the trust that particular network says that encryption is worth X amount of dollars.
Its value is
whatever it's trading at on the commodities
free market.
Yeah.
It's a free market. That's the other thing. I mean, our own bond market has not been a free market since 2009. It's well documented that we did quantitative easing. We did all this stuff. The market was not, there wasn't real price discovery because the market was in it to control yields, to force yields low so that we could recover from the financial crisis. And during the past 12 years, there's been numerous times when the economy was good and they threatened to raise rates, and immediately the stock market would take a turn like it has recently, and they would stop right away. So, well, we're not going to raise rates, and then the market would turn and go right back up.
Yeah, well, the whole quantitative easing, we still really, really, really don't know how that's going to 8 years, 12 years. How long have we been doing? 20 years?
No, since 2010.
Through 2010. So we really don't know. This has been a real, people theorize this. We really don't know. Because have they stopped that at this point? The quantitative, we think what they have. We don't really know whether. Have they?
Very good point. Publicly, they say they've stopped.
But we don't
and
know.
They actually said they were going to do quantitative tightening. So let's just back up here. So that how crazy our economics, our banking system is. Quantitative easing and a fiat currency. The advantages of having a fiat currency is you can print as much money as you want. And this goes all the way back forever. In the Roman Empire, when they got in economic trouble and ran deficits, they would dilute silver and gold with other metals.
Right.
That's the same type of thing that you're debasing the currency, and it's really a form of inflation.
Right.
So, we're printing money all the time, raising the debt. And what we are doing are issuing bonds, U.S. government bonds, and buying them with the money we print. That's quantitative easing.
That's called kissing your sister. You know what I mean?
That is
finance.
That is keeping our economy going. That is how we have avoided all these crises, and that's the remedy, and that's how that works, and that's why our deficit now is 31. Our debt is over 30 trillion, and our deficit is over 3 trillion.
Right. Well, the problem has been with. I totally think it's the way of the future. I mean, there's just no way, because there is no in God. You got to trust in God to throw a few bucks in your pocket, because there's nothing backing it. It's absolutely, and we're in a different economy. We're in different administration. And I think that they're all working overtime on putting us deep sixing the US of A. And they may be succeeding. I mean, I've never seen anything. This whole thing that just happened with Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia, China's involved, and Russia, it should scare the shit out of everybody.
Well, think though, I know there are enemies, but if you're living in Russia and that's your home and that's your government and you want to sell oil,
absolutely,
why do you have to use a US dollar?
I mean, that's where we're at.
So this is why Russia, China, you're right, Iran, they want to get off the US as the reserve currency. And it would undermine our strength.
We'd be totally screwed.
Yeah. Because now, only because we have the world's reserve currency allows us to print money the way that we do and to keep this game going.
Right.
Once we're not the reserve currency,
demand's going to go.
It's going to be
through the ground. Through the ground.
Yeah.
It's just supply demand, really.
So what's going on right now?
Yep.
This is what I believe from reading a lot of different people.
Yep.
And from my experience of being in financial markets, is if we weren't at war right now, they would not be talking about raising rates. The excuse that they're trying to kill inflation is all based on raising rates to make the dollar stronger, to make it harder for Russia to trade its oil. And that is the war. It's financial. So we're raising rates, and behind closed doors and everything, they're trying to get off the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So there's a war going on that's invisible every day,
every single day. Yeah.
And when we are talking about, fighting inflation and we got to raise rates, they're full of it, because our inflation, there's two sides to inflation.
Yeah.
Supply and demand. So, if there's a lot of demand for something and there's not a lot of supply, like we had for oil in the 70s, that creates inflation. People need more money to buy the goods that they need. And the people making the goods are behind because everything's costing more and it spirals out of control.
Yep.
What we have right now is the inflation is in the supply line because of energy and food. Everything else, it got bumped up because of the pandemic, and everything was, skyrocketing. Lumber, copper, anything you needed, the prices were going crazy. Well, they've all now reversed course. The demand, the economy is not so strong. There's not such a demand that's pushing those prices up. As a matter of fact, they're coming down.
Right.
So if the prices are coming down and the inflation is on the supply side, raising rates only creates less demand. It does nothing to fix the supply problem.
No, and they're
always, as a matter of fact, it makes it worse. So that's not going away. And they're talking like they're doing this for our good to keep prices down, when I believe they're completely lying. They're raising rates because we are trying to stick a thorn into the side of Russia and China.
And the thing that's interesting, because if you remember, was it the 70s where we hit a high inflation during the Jimmy Carter? What they were trying to do is get interest rates to match the inflation rate. They were saying that was it's fighting fire with fire. You're going to mash the two of those together. That's going to stop everything, and then it starts to correct itself. That's not the rules we're playing by today. We're not playing by those same rules. And
what about OPEC cutting oil, right? Does that recently create more demand?
That's all part of the war, so now they're going to cut supply.
Yeah.
So the prices stay high in the U.S., make it harder on us, and see if they make it harder on us, our economy should be softer. Right. We shouldn't have to raise rates, but it's all a game between these different sides.
Just to go back to the concept of war, we are in a time where you can affect we have multiple countries out there that can actually affect, and what we've got is they've joined together. So Saudi Arabia, for whatever reason, they don't. I was watching just the human interaction of Biden with the Saudi Arabian prince. If you just turn off your sound and watch that prince, he does not like Joe Biden, and none of those Saudi Arabians did. And I don't know what the story is with that, but obviously the story is we're going to fuck you really hard, and here's what's going on. So they're going to pull out 2 million barrels a day, and Russia's involved in this as well. And that's going to have a dynamic effect on this economy. It's going to take about a quarter for us to realize that. We keep releasing the reserves, but I'll tell you, that's one of the scariest things right there. And this war is far different. We're not going to see casualties. So people are going to be like, oh, whatever. They're going to continue to go to Chick-fil-A and, watch their Netflix and bring their Chick-fil-A home and sit on their couch and eat shit and get fatter and just kind of be wandering around. And, oh, yeah, there's the financial news network. Click, switch back over. I mean, people don't have
here come the elections. I'll just, vote for Schumer again. Everything will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, so you've got this whole situation where the manipulation of this, it used to be us. We were the major manipulators. That's all changed big time. And I still am bewildered by why we're not pumping oil out of our ground, and we're going to Venezuela. We're going to all these bad actors, and we're kind of relying on them to pull us out. And I got a secret. I got bad news. They all fucking hate us, and it's going to be interesting to see how by the time we go into January, we're going to be. You could see gas at $9, $10. In California, it'll be 13, but that's the way it always.
So are we still saying that crypto is not safe from this because we're still trading in the U.S. dollar pretty much? It's still the oil standard.
Well, I think what how does crypto get from an esoteric trading platform to a mainstream? And you had explained that what has to happen, it can happen quick. I mean, and we were talking about India. And when don't you go ahead?
So there's two different things still. Bitcoin, is the most decentralized of any of these cryptocurrencies. And what these are really peer-to-peer networks, right. All of them. They're peer-to-peer networks. Bitcoin is out there without a CEO, without a headquarters, without an office, with the strongest network that can't be hacked, hasn't been hacked to date. People try every single day. Yep. And that's what I was saying before. They could have stopped it early on if anybody took it as a real threat.
I thought Ethereum got hacked, and that's why they released Ethereum.
Yeah, see, Ethereum's different, though. Ethereum is different. Okay. Bitcoin is proof of work. It's a different standard and has an incredibly strong, secure network. So people have lost Bitcoin and had it hacked, but it's because they left it at an exchange. So when you buy a stock, it comes from the New York Stock Exchange or over the counter, NASDAQ, whatever. And I have an account at Merrill Lynch. When you get your statement, it says Merrill Lynch custody for
you, Frank Polsinello, right?
Right. So they're holding that for you. So people, when I was talking before, that have lost Bitcoin because they left it on a computer or on a thumb drive are nervous about that. They leave it at the exchange.
Oh, got it.
Okay. Right. So now the exchange has custody of it, but their cybersecurity, are all different levels.
Only as good as it's good, right?
So that's where Bitcoin has been hacked before. It has never been hacked on its own network. So what they say is, if you don't have the keys, the crypto, that 64, character identifier.
Yep.
You don't really have the Bitcoin. If you don't have that,
you're
Yeah.
You got nothing.
It's at the exchange and
Yep.
and it can get hacked.
So
So
the
there's
And it
a-
can't really be.
So
It
there's
can't be mined at that point, right? Because like if you lost your crypto wallet, it still lives on the crypto wallet. You just don't have access to it. A
Right.
miner can't
Still-
access that.
no, they can't be remined. No,
Right.
no. Once it's
mined, it's mine. It's there.
and if you lose it, you lose it. Just like if you lose $1 out of your pocket,
Does the network when you look at I got one question before I ask this one. Where is the origins? There's been lots of talk about what the origins of Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, who did Bitcoin? And we know what the obvious answer to that is: our friends at the CIA. But I mean, which I could totally believe. But was that really? Do you know how the origins of that began, or is there? What's the folklore? I mean, what is the? Do you know what it is, or don't we want to talk about it?
That's more your strength.
Probably the dark
than
web.
mine. I
The Silk Road.
Yeah.
who started it and where it came from. It's all a mystery, and if it's
Is
easy,
it like
it's
God?
easy to
It's
Google.
the universe.
Well, there's some people that feel it is like a religion.
Yeah, no, I know.
If you want to, it takes a certain amount of responsibility and discipline if you want to own it, and you have to have a certain faith that it's worth something. There's
Right.
a lot of parallels, to religion and truth.
Right.
Then there's a lot of people that intermingle the two when they talk about.
I've seen them.
These Bitcoin
Crazy
maximalists,
people.
that say Bitcoin,
Yeah.
should be the standard. But I want to go back because I was telling you the difference
Yeah, go
between
ahead.
Bitcoin and then all these other cryptocurrencies,
Which is-
Ethereum and everything else.
Dogecoin.
They're
and all
all right. They're all peer-to-peer networks,
that. Okay.
and they all perform different functions. So, Ethereum is built as a network of computers all over the world that you can add more computer programs and applications on top of it. So it's an open source network where people can develop applications and run it on Ethereum and have control of it.
Blockchain, right?
What's
That's
that?
blockchain versus.
Well,
that's
it's all
blockchain, right?
blockchain is the technology that allows all these that builds the peer-to-peer networks and keeps track of it. Blockchain,
It's like a torrent.
blockchain is the ledger that keeps track of
Right.
all the transfers of the assets.
And that's what the government hates. They hate that.
Well, because
I was told that the blockchain is more of a decentralized platform versus.
it is.
Yeah.
But what it actually, the blockchain itself is the ledger that keeps track of it. So here's here's maybe another way to describe it. When you start talking about our banking system, the way it works today, it is not a big stretch to get to Bitcoin. And here's why. So you have a bank in the Northeast. You're banking there. You take your money out. You write checks. At the end of the day, whatever checks you wrote against another bank, they don't send money back and forth. They just write it on a ledger. Now, the two banks in the Northeast, in New York State, now you have checks written against banks in other states.
Right.
So now you have your regional bank that is now keeping track of everything on the ledger. So everything is on the ledger. And now we've already made a transition to digital. So now we have digital money that's being made every day by loans. People are doing their transactions and they're settled at the end of the day on a ledger. But the ledger is only seen by whoever's holding it.
Correct.
So what Bitcoin is that whole system running just the way it is, but everybody sees the ledger.
It's all the same. It's all the same. See, if you have 1 million, Bitcoin connections, they all are seeing the exact same ledger, and it's proven, so that the truth and viability of it is guaranteed.
So doesn't that mean there's some loss of freedom in that, as far as and I'm not just talking illicit activity?
No, it's not a loss of.
Where, in other words,
It's not a loss of freedom. You have more freedom because you're able to transfer it back and forth. But what you're losing is, this is the problem the government has with it. You would be losing privacy if somebody knew who it is. The ledger's open and verifiable by everybody, but the owners are anonymous. Okay. They don't know who they are. And that's why they're saying, it's going to be used by drug lords and, child pornography or the sex trade thing, because nobody knows who they are. Right. But all the transactions are open on this blockchain. And what's happened now recently is that people who have done bad actions and had ransom, they've hacked one of these exchanges, then, put up ransom or, to get paid extortion for 20 or $30 million. Yep. But the forensic accountants that can follow this stuff can figure out who the people are. And you're starting to see now it's not happening so often.
Right.
It'll happen less and less. But I think that was a pretty good description, is that this ledger is wide open. It's not that much different than our current banking system, other than that everybody can see the ledger and nobody knows who the owners are.
Right.
It's kind of the flip of what we have now. Everybody knows who the owners are, but you don't. The ledgers are one off.
When you're doing
go ahead.
When you're doing the conversion, so when I'm sitting here and I want to buy a car, okay, and I've got my Bitcoin stick, and I want to go into my Maserati dealership and I want to spend $300,000 on a car, 300,000 US dollars. So they're indexing of US dollars. That's
what I'm saying. We're right back to the dollar again, are we not?
Yeah, we are.
That's true. When you want to cash it in. That's my point.
And it's an incredible irony. So what we were talking before, that the US dollar is fiat and not based by anything. And now you're using Bitcoin, which is independent, not controlled by anybody. That would debase the dollar seems normal.
Yep.
But that has also strengthened the dollar, because exactly what you're saying, you have to sell, you still have to convert it back to dollars
in order to buy what I want to buy.
Right.
But
now more people are starting to take Bitcoin because they're willing to take the risk that it'll be higher in the future. But for most people to do the transaction now, you got to go back to Coinbase. You have an account at Coinbase. Let's say you're going to sell Bitcoin's trading just under 20,000. So you'd sell 15 Bitcoin for $300,000. The $300 would show up in your account.
Right.
This is another thing. The settlement, it'll be in your account like the same day, but now you got to get it out to the other side to write a check. So that is not as fast as it should be. But yes, you're going to have to sell your Bitcoin, convert it to dollars.
But that's slowly changing because people are accepting it.
Right.
Elon Musk basically means that Bitcoin is still oil standard based, right? For now.
No, it's independent. It's based on whatever people. It's whatever the open market is at the end of the day.
Yeah. See, the whole thing is they.
No, but but to cash it in, if you were to cash it, I'm of the mindset I'm hanging on to my Bitcoin because I do believe in it. But I'm saying if I was to cash it in, and we're working with U.S. dollars, it's still wins to the market, basically.
It's still supporting the dollar. The dollar, right? They can coexist side by side.
But that's true with if I'm going to go and buy something in Italy,
right?
I'm going to exchange it into a euro. Mm-hmm. So, but the real power of what we're talking about in this whole thing is the acceptance of it as a currency internationally. And then I don't have to do anything. Then it's trading off what Bitcoin's value is, which is where we're getting to. I mean, Elon Musk, I just don't know where the fuck he is on the whole thing because he's been Dogecoin and this one and that one. But when you really understand what is going on, the power of that is far exceeding anything we have where there's real value. It's hard for people, I think, to understand. See, people think that the dollar is. I've talked to people who think the U.S. dollar is represented by gold and silver. It's not represented by anything. There's not a
nothing.
single thing
Right.
that our money. It's the promise of us as the
John.
United States.
Well, let me back up for
Yeah.
a second, though. An important thing happened when we went off the gold standard
Right.
in 71. There was a lot of inflation. Our economy was really in a bad place. And there was a real crisis right at that point, whether the dollar was going to remain the world reserve currency.
Yeah.
And what they did was made a deal with Saudi Arabia, I think in 1973.
Yep.
That set the precedent that everything would be traded in dollars. So now what you have is the petrodollar. You've heard people
Yep.
say that.
Yep.
So now instead of the dollar being backed by gold, it's not backed by oil, but it quasi is. If all the trades have to be done in dollars for oil, that saved the U.S. to remain the world reserve currency in 1973. But the world's a lot different now. We made that deal with Saudi. We were able to offer them protection, our own money, a lot of things at that point that they needed to make that deal.
Right.
It's a different world now.
Oh my God, it's such a different world now.
So
what would happen
what is,
if,
what is their motivation to stay on the dollar?
Every day it becomes less and less viable for them to do that. What's interesting too is if you really look about it, they have to have faith in our political leadership and everything else in order for them to see the value in it. And
Foreign countries.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
No, that was all part of it, right? That we had the biggest military, that
Yep.
we had a free society, that we had,
Are we watching Rome? That's what I always say. When you look at the path of Rome, where they were, this is going off topic, but it's relative. What happened in Rome? Well, they started bringing it. Well, they had slaves, right? They were conquering countries, and they would bring those people in. Immigrants would come in, and they would do the job that the Romans didn't want to do. And if you were to look at the path of Rome, and maybe it's true with all empires, they eventually hit this inflection point where it turns the dynamics of their power around, and everybody's like, we're sick of you guys. And you can see that happening.
Well, there's a lot of people that talk about this. There's cycles.
Yeah.
And a world empire basically has like a 250 year life cycle.
Yeah.
And what happened in Rome, part of what happened with Rome, war is expensive. You're trying to maintain, your empire. Well, it's expensive, and they started debasing the currency. Soldiers needed to be paid. A lot of them weren't happy, weren't getting paid enough, caused dissension, weakened their military force, and eventually they were overthrown. They lost their discipline and a lot of the things that made them great. And inflation and greed and debt eventually
and
demised
lazy, and nobody wanted to go to work. And, gee whiz, everybody's sitting on.
What time's the orgy start?
Yeah. What time's the orgy start? Let's be there early. Bring the horse and bring the sheep.
A fun thought experiment. If we were, like some of my conspiracy friends, and Greg, you know some of them, if we were to get off the petrodollar, some of my conspiracy friends would say, well, free energy technology is being subverted because we need to be on the petrodollar. But say it did happen, would that destabilize the U.S. dollar?
No.
Is that why?
No, coming off of it would be. You're saying if we got off the petrodollar?
Correct.
Yeah, it would be bad.
What would back the U.S. dollar?
Well, the dollar would be very weak, and we would be under incredible financial stress because we wouldn't be able to keep printing money and having people.
Well, the demand's gone.
Pay our bonds, right?
So once the demand starts to diminish, then the value starts to decrease. And
so, what would be the answer to that? How would you stabilize the economy if we had free energy?
Oh, I don't have the answer for how to stabilize it after that. No, that's why we're in really dark times.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to be on the petrodollar, though. Is that correct? So some of these conspiracy people could be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're totally right.
I
Jude, I want to say something. There are no more conspiracies. There's maybe one or two left. They've all been proven that they're not conspiracies at this point.
There's greater or less truth, I guess. Yeah. Another fun thing I should ask Frank, because you have a theological background. Some of the talk in Revelations of the mark of the beast and all this can't buy or sell without this mark of the beast. You think this Bitcoin encryption, which probably will, then if you marry that with, say, Elon Musk's Neuralink, and someday all your information is just stored in your internal hard drive, including your Bitcoin or whatever currency we're on at that point. So was Revelations right all along?
Yeah, you want to know something?
Like if you want to get crazy,
No, well, we can get crazy. That's what podcasts are all about. But what's interesting that you're saying that is the scarier person. The Neuralink thing is kind of interesting because they could do good with that. They could make people have a walk, eyesight, all that.
Right. That's what'll make it to the mainstream, I think.
Yeah, that's what'll drive that whole thing. But what's more interesting is what the reptilian, Satanist, non-meat eating, pudgy boy, Bill Gates, he's got that chip that they put into in between your index finger and your thumb, which has all of your. Yeah, it has all of your information in it. You want your medical information, it's in there. You can access
and that'll be your Bitcoin wallet in there too.
You probably will put your Bitcoin wallet in there. Yeah. But I think that has been definitely referred to as the mark of the beast. There's been all kinds of shit that has been referred to. There was when I was in the tech world, there was a technology called Guardian Angel. And what an interesting name. But that was a chip locator. It was probably just a little GPS thing, like the what's the fucking thing iPhone the little things they can track everything with. I can't think of the name of it right now. It was a version of that would go in. So it was for kidnappings. A lot of wealthy people were having it put into their bodies for those types of things. But this was 25 years ago. One thing I do know, because I was subject to it, the government did not like anything that was decentralized. And that's what my problem was. They came after me. Once they realized what we were doing, they were like, no fucking way. We can't have this survive. We can't have these guys be the default software for this because they're not. BlackRock wasn't invested. Vanguard wasn't invested. The CIA's venture arm.
Well, not only are they not invested, they can't control it.
Right.
They can't monetize it. So all of these cryptocurrencies are peer-to-peer networks. And that is definitely part of the government being against it, is that there's no way to turn it off. With Bitcoin, there's no way to turn it off. A lot of these other cryptocurrencies now, they do have a headquarters, and there's an argument. If they're not decentralized enough, then they're companies. They should be publicly traded. And that's what the SEC is really coming down on. And there are some that are not formed the right way and that are, just trying to manipulate things to make a quick buck.
Right.
But a peer-to-peer network, as is, so there is a peer-to-peer network called Filecoin, that it's a storage center. So like you had with a bunch of computers,
with the movies,
if you're not using, the storage you have on your computer, if you're not using it, you can put it on the cloud,
right?
Connected by all these other computers. Everybody puts their stuff up there and it's supposed to be cheaper than AWS.
Okay.
They promote it that way. I don't think that it actually is, but the idea is that the incredible power of connecting millions, tens of thousands,
all that processing power,
millions of computers creates a incredibly strong network. So Filecoin is different from Amazon, that when there is money made on the network, it's shared by all the people on the network.
Right.
It doesn't go to a headquarters, that's part of their quarterly earnings report. Another way to look at it is when you're using a Visa card, there's a network of restaurants that are all connected. And then you have a network of the card holders.
Yep.
So you go and use your Visa card at a restaurant, that 2 to 3%, instead of it going to the Visa headquarters, goes to all the people on the network that
help facilitate
that facilitate the computer network. And that's the cryptocurrency, that 2 to 3%. People focus on that. Like they focus on the money thing. They're not focusing on the network.
Right.
And that's what the strength is. And if you can find the networks that really have a unique and valuable function, those are the things that are going to be great investments.
Right. Just so people probably don't know, but who will listen to this, but I was involved in a peer-to-peer. We had created the first peer-to-peer, which we had huge files. King Kong was the largest file at the time. This is 20 years ago, 18 years ago. I can't remember. But what we did was anyone who was on the network participated in the distribution and was paid to distribute movies and music, whatever we were doing, games. And there was blockchain technology attached to that because we kept track of all the accounts. And it was way ahead of its time. It was very revolutionary, but the government did not like it. They hated it. And, we had a visit from them. And I could go on and on about the conspiracy on that whole event. You were there with me when I was doing it. But it's going to be interesting because I really believe. Well, one of the things that we should just real quick, I just want to talk about this because what the whole concept of building fear into the populace, right? Oh my God, if we let Bitcoin go, we're going to melt the polar ice caps. It's all bullshit. I mean, we've been waiting for that to happen for 30 years now. Al Gore was wrong. They're all wrong. I always say, well, let's see. The banks still lend money. Bill Gates, Barack Obama, they all have beachfront property. If they're so afraid that everything's going to get swallowed up, why would they be on the beach? Banks are the most conservative places on earth, are lending. Investment partnerships that have prospectuses need to tell you if they're going to get gobbled up by the Atlantic Ocean. There's none of that in any of those prospectuses. If it was legit, they'd have to put it in. That's the way the security world works. That's the way these limited liability partnerships and things that are building these condos down in Miami and wherever they're building them, right? There's nothing in the prospectus that says, oh yeah, you're going to get swallowed up by the ocean. Nothing. And insurance companies. So you got some of the most conservative industries in the world that are here, and they're not talking about any of the supposed environmental concerns of doomsday and all these. I don't know if you saw these kids who messed up the Van Gogh sunflower picture. Have you seen that? They threw Campbell's soup. It was kind of ironic, right? Tomato soup, Campbell's soup. I was thinking of Andy Warhol's involved somehow. Right. And they whipped it on there and then they glued their hands. Like, these are punk kids that probably come from extremely wealthy families. And it was probably their mother's painting that she's letting the museum have. Who knows? But it's just, there's a lot of, we all know you were in the financial world. I was a banker. You were on the trading side of things. One of the most interesting things was when Goldman Sachs decided they were going to create a carbon trading system. Remember that whole fucking thing? And it was early. They couldn't get traction with it. And like, if I wasn't using so much carbon, I could give you my carbon credits and all this bullshit, right? Al Gore was heavily invested in that too, or he was the spokesman for it. But the point is that everybody always goes to the environment. Like heart attacks are up because of the environment. Skin cancer's up because of the environment. And then that report came out on cryptocurrencies. And what was the whole thing with that? And it was debunked, but of course the debunking never got the traction that the report got because nobody wanted, the one thing before just to get into conspiracy theories, the media is so in this thing, they lie. You get sick when you listen to right?
Yeah.
We all do when we listen into how they lie and lie and lie and bullshit their way through it. And, you always used to I always used to be able to rely on financial news reporting to get what the real deal was. It doesn't happen anymore. They're lying too. So they're propping up our economy. But one of the things that I just was blown away by, we touched on it a little bit, was the economic or the environment. Why don't you talk about that report? And then who was it that debunked it? I can't remember.
So there's a report done by the White House. They have a group that
was it this administration?
Yeah, it just came out in September.
Okay.
So they have a report of cryptocurrencies and digital assets effect on the environment. And it is just full of quoting people that are not, aren't recognized as being experts at all. It is incredibly biased. But here you are, like you would like to trust your government, like they're going to look into this and they're going to, if there's something really bad with it, they're going to protect us and do away with it. But when you read through this, it takes a while to know who the different players are, and how cryptocurrencies and everything works, and then just how everything works. When you relate what's going on with Bitcoin to Bank of America, it isn't any different. The energy that it takes to run it. And matter of fact, I think people have said Bitcoin's less than what it takes to run Bank of America.
Well, eventually it's going to be less because there's going to be anything to mine. It's just going to be traded. Right.
So eventually there'll be a cap, but then the energy that all the people on the network are using every day to maintain it, but you're turning on your computer anyways. So that's not really any different. But there's a guy, Nick Carter, who's a credible research reporter. He's been early on the crypto game. He's been in it, I think, for over 10 years. And he takes the White House report and goes right through it, writes right over it. This
bullshit.
Yeah, right. This is not a credible source to be citing. This is the wrong number. This is, and goes through the whole thing. And it is so incredibly biased against crypto. But the reason is it's coming around election time.
Yeah.
And some of the biggest supporters are financial institutions, and Bitcoin, like we described before, can exist on its own and could be the basis of a new banking system. Like right now, your collateral is almost nothing. But if you put up Bitcoin as collateral and did loans against it, it would be a lot more honest, and it would be a lot more effective banking system, because when loans go bad, you would actually have the collateral. Right now, so much of our banking is leveraged up on these trades and stuff where we have so much more debt and it's not tracked, that on the blockchain, you could track it and you could limit the leverage.
You want to know what summing that up, what you're saying? There is no influence. It is purely a traded thing.
So that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
So eventually Bitcoin and Ethereum running decentralized finance, you hear that term a lot. Mm-hmm. A lot of those applications would run on Ethereum's network, and all they're doing is taking out the middleman in financial institutions, all the way from insurance to banking to mortgages, whatever it is, they can all take out the middleman. And that is the threat that the government doesn't want. But part of it is because the strongest lobbyists and guys that are giving them money are JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch.
And so the thing that when we talk about manipulating stock trades and currency trades and commodity trades, a lot harder to do in the Bitcoin environment than it is what they can do. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm sure it can be. Some genius will figure it out. But
now that they come out, the more they come out with ETFs for Bitcoin, which is another stupid thing.
What's an ETF though for people?
An ETF is an exchange traded fund, which is like a mutual fund. So you're taking a group of companies.
Yeah.
And so that you don't have to buy each one individually. It's like a mutual fund.
Mutual fund, right?
But it trades like a stock.
Right.
The only difference between a mutual fund and an ETF is the mutual fund, you would only get the price at the end of the day. It's not interactive during the day.
Right.
An ETF, it trades all day long. So
24 hours a day.
Right. So, if you went in, and you heard that the world was falling apart, we're having a financial crisis. Well, if you sold your mutual fund in the morning and the stock market, say, was flat, this has happened a few times in the last week.
Yeah.
The stock market might be up or down at the beginning of the day and then completely opposite at the end. So say you sold your mutual fund and the market was up in the morning and then it was down 800 points at the end of the day. Even though you wanted to sell in the morning, you get the price that the market closes at. An ETF, if you sold it in the morning, you get the price real time. You get the price of what all the things are. So that's an ETF versus a mutual fund. You don't need an ETF for Bitcoin. It's only one thing. It's not a group of anything. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand completely.
It's silly.
Yeah,
So do you think Proposition 14067 or Executive Order 14067 will destabilize Bitcoin?
I have to read that more. I can't just make a blanket statement that it's going to destabilize it. I think they walked both sides of the fence when they wrote the thing, from what I remember initially. I haven't gone back and looked at that closely, but the idea is that if we're going to come out with more ETFs to trade Bitcoin, it is a way for people to continue to short it. Well, the best example for this is gold, which is the best analogy for Bitcoin, because there should be a limited supply. The reason why gold has value is because it's hard to mine and there's a relative limited supply. So there's a lot of analogies between, gold and Bitcoin. If all the gold in the world, you knew the location of it, and it was on a blockchain, the price would be substantially higher than it is today. But nobody really knows what the quantity is. So it's whatever the market trades at.
That's interesting.
And if the really big players don't want gold to go up, they're able to short it. Like, they're able to move the market because they have the most money.
Yes.
So they can buy or sell things and move things, but most importantly, be able to short or sell things to suppress prices when they want. And until it's advantageous to them and they have a big position, then the price goes higher.
You see, the whole thing with this whole new currency, if people understood, if they could take time to use their brain, critical thinking, understand how it works, understand first how the US dollar works, understand how currencies work.
The banking system.
Yeah, the whole banking system works, right? If they would take a fucking minute out of their lives to say, where's my next opportunity, right? I own some currencies. And once you understand how the banking system works, I come from banking, you come from banking. It's changed dramatically since we've been in it. What's happened is someone said, I'm going to take this air and I'm going to turn it into value. I'm going to take this thing. It's like software, it goes back to software. It is software. I'm going to replicate the software as much as I can. And I'm going to then stop the demand. And this software can be used anywhere, anytime, for anything. And it becomes valued because it trades, and the wider the market becomes, it becomes more valuable. The thing that's so fascinating about it, people look at that Bitcoin thing and say, well, what is it? It's nothing. Well, neither is a fucking dollar. And in reality, Bitcoin has more value as soon as people can get it in their fat noggins, right? That wait a minute, would you say about the U.S.? We were bankrupt in 1967, and we never recovered from that bankruptcy, and we just made this artificial bullshit. And thank God the Saudis made a deal in '73.
Yep.
And that propped up the dollar when we were really at a pretty difficult time. And when you just consider all that, and this is another argument, which is the whole concept of capitalism. We are not in a capitalist economy, never have been. When people say, "Oh, I hate capitalism. I can't stand it. I'm to socialism." Well, first of all, socialism has never worked anywhere in the world. It worked in Finland. Well, there's like 2 million people and they've got the highest rate of Alzheimer's. So they don't even know where the fuck they are most of the time, right? But when you look at the fact that socialism's never worked anywhere, not like capitalism. When we were capitalists, but when you really take a look at capitalism, when the Rockefellers and those guys were all, they were all bad dudes. We could get into a lot of shit on that. They're talking about conspiracies, right, Jude? William Randolph Hearst killing the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. So the point is that the real thing here with this Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, who's going to survive? Obviously, Bitcoin's the mother of all cryptocurrencies. It just makes complete sense that you would convert that over. And you had said, we were talking about this offline, if India just said, "Oh, that's going to be our currency," they'd crush it. It would be gone. It would become a common currency in the world.
It would put them in a unique and change their global
right.
power
It would change
position quickly. So if you take everybody's cell phone and put an app on there that made it easy for you to hold your Bitcoin, and that it was sharded. So say you lost your phone, somebody else couldn't just take the Bitcoin, that if there was a way for you to retrieve it by, sharding, have different pieces of your information spread out that you could retrieve it later and get your Bitcoin back. You put that on everybody's phone. 1 billion people
would do it in a heartbeat. Yeah.
And the government gives you incentive, here's $100 or the equivalent of that in Bitcoin.
Right.
Give you some incentive to do it. That's the future of the success of Bitcoin.
Right.
Is when it's easier to do it right on your phone. If Apple comes out with an app or someone does this, but to me, it is independent of the government.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that want to see Bitcoin become the equivalent of the world reserve currency and have the same market capitalization as gold. Gold has a $10 trillion market cap. So Bitcoin's only a third of 1 trillion or half of 1 trillion. It'd have to go up 20, 30 times from here.
Just one more question about it too. So when you say a Bitcoin trades for 30 grand in US dollars, right?
20 grand right now.
It's 20 grand.
Yeah.
That becomes fractionalized on trading?
Yes.
Okay. So you're able to fractionalize the actual Bitcoin itself.
Right. You don't have to buy one.
Okay. That's what I was curious.
You can do it by dollars. You can buy $100 of Bitcoin, which whatever
that breaks down fractionally.
Is, right.
And then you have ownership of that fraction of the Bitcoin. So that's an interesting thing too, if people understood it. It's not something where you have to have 30 grand. There's a misconception about that. And they've done a good job at just saying, "Oh, you need $30,000 or $20,000 to go buy Bitcoin." Jude, are you in the electric chair or something over there?
No, my AirPods just died. I switched to the phone. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm like, oh my God, he's gone.
It was a low battery.
Ray gun.
No, I've just been taken out.
I thought it was the government.
Yeah, that's it. The CIA's listening in on this. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, aren't the fractional divisions called like Yoshis or some unit like that? I think the Japanese guy came up with it.
Yeah, sats.
Oh, is that right?
Okay.
Well, they originally thought that this guy, I know who you're talking about, Jude. That was one of the people they said had created the software. And I mean, it's really quite fascinating. I mean, that's something I would like to try and dig in and see if you could find it.
But what I was going to say with the Bitcoin's independent, running on its own.
Yeah.
But much like gold, the price can be suppressed when there's ETFs and you can short it. The money of these global financial institutions can push their weight around and suppress it for a certain amount of time.
The masters of the universe, which they're doing,
Yeah,
right?
so-
I mean, they're
Yeah.
they're in the process of doing that.
Right. So right now, Bitcoin has started to trade in correlation with stocks, but it's much more like gold. Bitcoin doesn't have any earnings. Gold doesn't have any
Right.
earnings.
Just
It doesn't do anything really, but it allows you to transfer your gold. If you had a system where you could transfer your gold as quick as you could transfer Bitcoin, that would be a valuable, valuable asset. So my theory is, as much as Bitcoin would be great for freedom and for personal sovereignty,
Yeah.
I don't believe it's really going to work and go high until the government and the financial institutions are positioned to benefit from it going up.
So that's a big question as to when will that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Lynch's fund trades. Isn't the Magellan fund trading
Fidelity.
or Fidelity?
Yes.
Okay,
Fidelity is going to make it easier.
that's Peter
for
Lynch,
people.
right? Is that
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Peter
That's
Lynch.
what we work for. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some major funds that have put it into their portfolio at whatever level they're. So that's usually a pretty good sign.
But the other part of this is, as much as maybe the U.S. doesn't want it to work or has reasons, to suppress it, it is out there on its own and it's global. So these other countries.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. There are no boundaries. It's
Is it-
like it's not U.S. shores
Right.
or U.S. dollars.
So maybe these other countries could take positions in it, as they get off the dollar,
well,
to give them a different currency to trade in.
right. As you start to see the World War III, which is occurring in the financial markets, not in the normal way we look at war. And just going back to the fact that you're not blowing up buildings and you're not destroying infrastructure, you're just going to say, hey, I'm sad to hear you're out of money. We can lend you some money. And then, China's our biggest owner of U.S. debt, but they're working overtime. They hate Bitcoin. They've said it right out loud. So they're working overtime on not allowing that to happen because they're manipulative. They're currency manipulators. They want control of that.
Well, they want control of their people.
Yeah.
If all their people have Bitcoin and they can trade it without the government and their bank or anybody interfering with it, it's giving them more freedom.
Yes.
And they don't want them to have freedom.
Yes. I'll tell you, one of the things that has bothered me a lot recently is this insider trading that these politicians are involved in. When you realize that, I don't want to get political in this particular venue, but when you realize that there are people trading that are elected officials on the committees that they oversee, and their husbands, and their husbands are trading or whatever they're trading, and they're getting better results than Warren Buffett and all of these, these hedge fund guys that are trade. It's just so corrupt when you think about it, because people would go to jail. Jude, you and I would go to jail, right?
Oh yeah, without doubt.
Yeah,
We'd be buddies.
Yeah, we would be. We'd be in the clink in about a minute and a half if we were taking inside information. And all of our politicians, Democrat and Republican, are exempt from the bullshit that occurs to people like you and me. Dennis Levine, Michael Melkin, some of the guys that had actually gone to prison for this
Martha
stuff.
Stewart.
Martha Stewart. She did nothing compared to what these guys are doing.
Right.
What was there's a $5 million trade? It was
whatever the amount was, it's nothing compared to what goes on. And this is a hair of my crowd too. I cannot believe we have anti-insider trading laws. We have the laws. Why would they not apply to our elected officials? They are such pigs and morally bankrupt to think like they could do something that is illegal and people go to jail for everywhere else.
Yeah.
They're exempt from it.
Well,
there's no leadership. That they are okay with that is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We should vote against every single one of them that have ever made a trade
and get rid of them.
There's a lot of things that you and I, may be able to do.
Yeah.
that you just know is wrong.
Right.
You don't have to be, there doesn't have to be an additional law to say that elected officials shouldn't be insider trading. There's already a law.
Right. Well, you want to know something? What we're finding out today is just how bad it all is. Whether you like Donald Trump or didn't like him, I don't really care. But he really kind of pulled back the curtain. I mean, one of the podcasts I want to do is the Ukraine. I am really dying to do that podcast because when you understand what the Ukraine was. So for just to understand the banking subject so we don't digress too much, but the Vatican used to be the money laundering capital of the world. Okay. But the U.S. being brilliant decided, hey, we need more than 1 point of money laundering. So at the end of the war, they took 70,000 Nazi families out of Germany and put them in Eastern Ukraine. And so they lived there and they flourished, very similar to what's going on in South America. You can go to South America and think you're in, you're in Munich, Germany.
No, wait a minute. You forgot to mention some came to the U.S. to start NASA.
Right. And there's that's Project Paperclip, which my uncle was involved in. My uncle Bill was involved in working with all those German scientists. And what was there? There was 3,000 of them, Jude, that they brought here. But part of the deal was that they brought those other 70,000 and all of those 70,000 into the Eastern Ukraine. And what happened was the Eastern Ukraine became the money laundering capital for the U.S., the elites in the U.S., politicians, and it was the Vatican. So they traded between. And what happened was they saw it coming, right? They were afraid the Vatican was going to come under some serious magnified search because of what was going on with the priests and all that. So our government started to move assets into the Ukraine, and the Ukraine became so corrupt. And it was all part of banking, money laundering. And I always say the CIA and the FBI don't protect us from bad people or child trafficking. What they do is they destroy the competition. They own all drug trafficking and all that's all owned by the CIA. And that's a podcast for another day.
Yeah, but I don't know. I signed up for this.
No, you didn't. We won't get into it. Plus, you told me you had your insurance policy paid up. But I was just going to say the whole banking thing has been totally, it's so interesting because once you understand how banking works and how they can once you got a corrupt government involved, right, you can just keep plowing money through there. I know for a fact in the Vatican, there were some pretty significant families that were money laundering through that Vatican bank, like industrialist families that were involved in drug trade and a whole bunch of other shit that were money laundering through the Vatican bank. And, everybody knew it. There's a lot of scandal that went around at one point during the Vatican bank. But the Ukraine is just another component of that I think is far broader. And, Mitt Romney's kid's been involved in it, and, the Bidens, Pelosi, and all those guys. But it's, we'll see what happens. That discussion on the Ukraine is another podcast we're doing. And that's on the Ghislaine Maxwell, because there's a tinderbox of two things that are occurring. One is the Ghislaine Maxwell story. which we've been talking about, and the Ukraine. They walk hand in hand in the valley of evil because it's it's pretty significant. But with that said, Jude,
Yes, sir.
do you have any enlightening shit you want to close with? Something that'll help people live better? Blah blah blah.
Well, yeah, it's best for us not to wallow in the space of fear. And like you said, it's all around us, and it's not hard to fall prey to it.
Yeah.
I think if we keep focused on I love the fact that you're always digging and turning over stones.
Oh my God. What I found out, I talked to I'm not going to get into it because we're going to do another podcast on it, but I talked to a military friend of mine who was explaining the Epstein plane to me. I was talking to Frank about it, right? It is fucking scary. It is scary. Something that 99% of people in the world don't know about that Epstein plane. And it's not something that's been front and center. No one's really heard too much about it, but we're going to do.
Yeah. And the list, they got to release the list. Where's the client list?
Yeah. And that's something, Frank. I mean, that's
that
what
could be the next. Yeah.
So I say, how did she get convicted if there's these crimes and there's no follow-up? That all these girls were abused and, part of sex trafficking. That's what she's going to jail for. Okay. Who are the other guilty parties?
And another thing.
That would not be that hard to start investigating and finding out.
Right. And another thing, the whole concept of him committing suicide in the kind of prison and the kind of surveillance they had on him, absolutely fucking impossible. Take it from someone who knows.
And they just want us to buy it.
Yeah. And
Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Oh,
yeah, no, absolutely impossible. And the two guys that fell asleep.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. They knew if they fell asleep in the normal course of business in prisons that they would have been in deep shit. But I have a feeling it'd be interesting to see what those guys are doing. They probably have a big place down in Miami with sports cars and living life, or Jeffrey Epstein's still alive. There's been some stuff about that's been.
Yeah. Who's to say?
Yeah. But that's going to be our next podcast. We have, stay tuned for that one because the whole plane thing, when you hear that, you will just not believe it. I was blown away. And I had a person in military who does C-130 payloads, and he's the one who told me about it. And then I, sure enough, looked it up. I sent you the article. Just like nobody's really asking any of the questions about that plane. They're just saying, oh, he was on this plane. It's a nice plane. It's expensive. A 727 is no bullshit, that plane.
Well, the week of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, they made sure that we watched a trial, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's divorce trial, getting coverage every single day.
Yep.
Just to block out everyone from paying any attention to the Maxwell trial or even asking any questions. It wasn't even on the evening news until the night that she was convicted.
In the 21st century, we're getting drawings of people in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Bad ones.
Well, even that, though, there weren't even drawings. They weren't even covering it.
They were.
I didn't see anything.
No, they were sketching it up. I don't know if they were in the room or if it was just they got to look.
But that's like when she got convicted, though. That wasn't like the 3 weeks.
Oh,
trial.
Right.
Yeah.
The 3 weeks during the trial, there was nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But federal court, you can't, right? I think.
Oh, you know what? They probably because all politicians get tried in federal courts and their friends do.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
Same as the insider trading thing.
Yeah. It's just, it's such bullshit.
Same deal.
The other thing that we want to talk about with these new series of podcasts, the Sleeping Man podcast, is Julian Assange. Nobody knows what's going on right now. I just read an article. It's a article out of Italy, and Mike Pompeo is been summoned by European courts to explain who it was that tried to kill Julian Assange about the last year of the Trump administration. They tried to kill him in London. There's this whole thing. There was a huge, Jude, didn't we read that? A huge article in Yahoo News about it. They did an investigative report on it. We had done a little podcast on it, but Julian Assange, to me, who's a reporter and an investigative reporter, we should be clamoring like crazy to know what is going on with that guy, just to kind of give a flavor of some of the things we'll be doing. Julian Assange, and then Edward Snowden. There was a point in my life where I was brainwashed, and I believe Edward Snowden was bad. I've seen him interviewed 3 times. I think he's a little arrogant for someone who could get shot in the head at any moment. I'd be a little more humble about things, but
I don't know about that. If you would,
probably not.
Yeah,
probably not. But he, what he did, and that kind of leans into what I was doing for a living with what we were involved in when we were building the peer networks. And I'll tell you, the CIA and NSA and not so much the FBI, but those 2 organizations inside the federal government were on it. They knew nothing about technology, and they were going to everybody who knew something about it to try and get what information they had. And I can tell you, they didn't like what we were doing at all. They were smart. They knew it could go beyond, you could create a currency with it. And that's what happened. But with that said, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Well, I want to add my 2 bits.
I was going to have you.
Off.
No,
okay.
I have a special thing I do. You got to wear the gladiator helmet I have here, and because you're the guest
with my sign off.
Yeah, with your sign off. So if you want to take a minute,
there we go.
Forget it, because you can't get the headphones over the top of it with this.
That's the only thing he's wearing, right?
Not this head.
Yeah. Well, no, Frank, we're here in togas. We're here in togas with people fanning us, and we're good.
Heading down to the baths later.
Yeah, we're gonna hit the baths, and there'll be a big Roman orgy at some point, but we'll wait and see what happens. But what were we going to say?
Well, we really have to get people learning about what Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies are, because the government is going to try to
stop it,
make it sound bad, or, as long as you have an educated opinion about it and you're not relying on the government's information. And I can just tell you that from the time that I've been following this, anybody that's looked into it, it takes time. It takes like 100 hours because you have to go back and learn our banking system, and you have to learn about the cycle. You have to learn all kinds of stuff that we just flew by, but it took me hundreds of hours.
I remember
to learn all that. And anyone who opposed it before 2017, they're all on board now. Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, the biggest bank in the world, or one of the biggest. Ray Dalio, the biggest hedge fund manager in the world.
And he was totally against it.
Said it was nothing.
Yeah, he hated it.
And now he's on board.
Yep.
These guys know money. Paul Tudor Jones, Stanley Druckenmiller, they're all big, wealthy hedge fund guys. They know money. They were against it. What changed everything was the pandemic, the amount of money that we printed. And we have printed 50% of the money that's ever existed in the world. Half of the money that's
crazy.
In the last 2 years.
Yep.
Half of the money that is in the world has been printed in the last 2 years. So that debasing of the currency, that inflation drove people to start looking at Bitcoin and learning what it is. And there's no one that has taken the time that I know of who looks into it and says it's garbage based on the technology. They all agree about the technology.
Yeah, killer technology.
It is unbelievable. And when you say there's almost a religious component about it, like it's perfect. And it has to be a store of value for money on the internet. That's the idea. Like it's almost impossible, but they were able to create it. Well, that doesn't mean that everybody's on board saying Bitcoin's going to be successful, because there are people that in the end say that the governments just won't allow it. That's the only argument against it. And if I can save you time, the people who haven't looked into it yet, if that's the only reason against it, then we need to learn what it is and support it.
Right.
So, I'm trying to reach out to some of the political candidates. I don't hear back from them. Just like, what is their position on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin? What do they know about it?
Right.
And if you don't know anything, I'd be glad to meet with you and discuss, give you some crypt notes or whatever.
Boy, they should be.
But you should learn about it.
Absolutely.
But you don't hear any of them talking about it.
No, you don't. Well, the banking industry, their lobbying group is huge, very strong. The securities people, another strong lobbying group. The tech people,
if they want to get elected, they're not talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so naive. Like I want them to talk about it.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. What's do you have a website and all that you want to do?
I do. It's Blockstone Asset Management, but the website is blockstoneam.com.
Okay. Blockstone AM. I don't know. There's some technology going off here. I don't know what the hell that was. But one last thing. I want to close up with two things. Recently in the news. So there's a new strain of COVID. Have we heard this? It's in Singapore.
You're going to keep this going all night.
Well, no, I want to leave this with people with thought, something to think about.
I want them to think about Bitcoin.
We're going to think about COVID. We'll wrap it up with we'll give you another pitch, but just to blow away the conspiracy theory. So Moderna is owned by the government. People don't know that it was owned by DARPA. They're invested in it. It's owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. They were putting the vaccine out there. What we know today is we were all right. The people who believe that masks didn't work, that CDC was full of shit. We all know that that's true today. But there's a new COVID strain out. I love this. It's like they just keep keep the same story rolling along. So this COVID, it's pretty contagious, and they're saying that the only thing that will protect you is the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, the new one. And they know that. And I'm like, they don't know shit, because you know how long it takes for them to figure out how a vaccine works?
Yeah. Why do we know all the answers to these vaccines in months?
Weeks.
Yeah.
We're talking 3 weeks that they discovered this. All of a sudden, we've got the vaccine for it. That's number one. The real big killer that no one has talked about is ivermectin, the horse dewormer, which isn't a horse dewormer, but ivermectin. A study came out during the peak of them really trying to. It came out in 2022, the beginning of 2022, and ivermectin is one of the most promising drugs in stopping the cell growth of cancer. It's hard to believe, right? A little 6-cent pill, 6 cents. I think that's what the cost to manufacture it is. And it is crushing it in cancer studies, especially breast cancer. So I just want to put that out there because people think it's a horse dewormer, and it's not. It's interesting, though. It is for parasites. That's where it works best. And there's been a lot of studies on cancer associated with fungus and having a parasitical relationship with the host, which is you as a human being, and that this drug is one of the most highly effective drugs that they've seen. And it was, I think, a 20-year study, and they came off that study and they printed the results. And but it was during a time where they were trying to convince us ivermectin was bad, and so the study got no traction and nobody even knows about it. But if you type in cancer and ivermectin, you'll see the study. So that's it. That's it for the conspiracy. We're going to go have Manhattans, Jude. It's too bad you're not here.
I'll have one for me, buddy.
We will have one for you. And until then, next episode, Ghislaine Maxwell, the Lolita Express, and the god-awful terror that was going on with that, and which has not been reported in the news, but it takes military guys to tell you what's really going on. All these little sources that give you information about what's going on in the government is worth a lot. Really begin to understand what's going on.
I'm ready for it. Bring it on.
We're going to do it. So with that said, have a good evening. Tune in to Sleeping Man, and see you soon.